I left for Vietnam March 1970, stopped in the Philippines for jungle survival, then on to Vietnam. The first stop was Cam Ranh Bay, which is the home of the 21st Tactical Air Support Squadron. My welcome to Vietnam was just after deplaning from the Flying Tiger transport aircraft. There was a rocket attack. We always flew in our 1505s, our khaki uniforms, so we were crawling along the tarmac to base ops. We sat in the hangar for 30 minutes until they all clear. At Cam Ranh Bay, we processed in, got our jungle fatigues, and briefings on the rules of combat. My first assignment was Kontum. Kontum is in the northern highlands of Vietnam. It's the site of a major conflict in 1969. The job of a forward air controller was to direct Army, Navy, Air Force weapons against the enemy, the Viet Cong, in support of the U.S. and Vietnamese military. In this capacity, we could direct Army artillery, Army Loach helicopters, Army attack helicopters, F-4s, A-1s, A-37s, F-100s, Navy A-4s, Navy A-7s, and any other fighter aircraft that may be in the area. The forward air controller, the FAC, would work closely with ground commanders of the Special Forces camps. We would provide support to ground troops during interdiction missions. We would support search and rescue missions of units that were lost or pilots that were downed. We would provide surveillance of the Viet Cong actions in the jungle and monitor the activities along the Ho Chi Minh Trail. In the area were numerous Special Forces camps. There was Firebase 12, southeast of Ben Hoa, Ben Het, a Special Forces camp, Manu Bach, Special Forces camp, Plateau G, a Special Forces camp, Poly Klung, a Special Forces camp, and Dak To 1 and 2. Working missions with commanders of Special Forces when it was possible the troops would be in contact. Many times they would ask us to land and exchange 7 of our Willie Petes, our marking rockets, for 7 2.75 flechette rockets. A flechette rocket had about 2,200 flechettes. These are 2-inch nails. They would clear the area about half of a football field. We also worked very closely with the Army hunter-killer teams. A hunter-killer team has a light observation helicopter called a Loach and a Cobra attack copter. Then the forward air controller provided top cover for both the Loach and the Cobra. After the copters would search underneath the jungle, they would find the enemy camps, and then the FAC would call in fighter bombers to finish off the VC. At Kontum, after flying, you might spend the night defending the airfield or the compound against Viet Cong attacks. It was quite an experience to be out there shooting anything that moved. After a couple of months at Kontum, we moved south 60 miles to Pleiku. This was a much more protected location. It had better barracks and nicer living areas. At Pleiku, if you were not flying on Sundays, then you might go with Father Soma to support the missions in the area. This was a way to help get a better image of the U.S. among the civilian community. So Father Soma would go to the missions, would work with the missionaries, support the nuns, and help the children. This was quite an experience. Other times, just to keep from being bored, I'd go over to the junkyard where there were numerous wrecked Jeeps. I'd find pieces of one, put them together with others, and after a while I had built one good Jeep. I was the only lieutenant in Vietnam with his own Jeep. It even had a white racing stripe. However, it was not all fun and games. Most of the time was spent flying. From missions to rescue downed pilots to supporting troops in contact. There was even one mission where we helped with the humanitarian effort to rescue civilians from Cambodia. The Khmer Rouge had overrun the Cambodian army, and the civilians had all located at an airfield at Bung Long, Cambodia. Our mission was to provide air support to the infantry that was there to get the civilians out, and also to act as a air traffic control, so the 130s, 123s, and 119s coming in could be kept separated and pick up as many civilians as possible to transport them to Thailand to safety. The mission was 3.5 hours. I was up that long when I found out that the replacement pilot was not going to be able to get out there, and I was asked to stay on target as long as possible. I leaned the engine back and continued to fly around performing our mission. After 5+ hours in the air, I had no choice but to head back to Pleiku, which was a little over an hour away. Flying back to Pleiku, I allowed the aircraft to gain altitude as the fuel burned down. On final approach about 5 miles out, I had a good angle toward the runway. About halfway down final, the front engine shut down and quit due to lack of fuel. At that point, it was nothing but a slow descent to the runway. When I landed at Pleiku, the second engine shut down due to lack of fuel. They had to tow the aircraft from the runway to the hangar. In spite of everything, being a forward air controller in Vietnam was probably one of the greatest jobs that a second lieutenant and first lieutenant could have. While you were in the area, you were the pilot in command, and the fighters responded to your wishes. Most of the time we knew we were taking ground fire, but very seldom were there any bullet strikes to the aircraft. In the first 9 months I was in Vietnam, I only had 2 bullet strikes, one while I was in Kontum that hit the right wing, and then another while in Pleiku, flying out of Pleiku, had another bullet strike hit the left wing. So just 2 of them in that time frame. And that leads us to why we're here today, the mission on 1 February 1971. This is a pilot's report of O2-A aircraft tail number 6810841, shot down on 1 February 1971. This statement is an account of an aircraft incident involving Lieutenant A.R. Hoenninger and Lieutenant Pete R. Platt. On 1 February 1971, I was awakened by Major John Williams, the Air Liaison Officer of the forward operating location at Pleiku. He informed me that a ground unit located south of Funan was under heavy attack and a FAC was needed in the area immediately. The time was 0340 hours. Major Williams then went down to wake up Pete Platt, who was to be the co-pilot. At 03:55, Lieutenant Platt, Sergeant Knight, the maintenance NCO, and I were on our way to the flight line. We quickly pre-flighted the aircraft and were off the ground at 0410 hours. Immediately after becoming airborne, I contacted March Q. He was the camp commander at Funan, and through relays utilizing his interpreters, we were able to get the ground situation of the unit in trouble. The unit was a Vietnamese unit, which necessitated the need for the relays through the ground interpreter. At this time, we were informed by Carbon Outlaw, the Direct Air Support Center, that they had already requested a shadow gunship for the operation, and it should be on station in about 30 minutes. At this time, the ground commander requested that we go to a different frequency on the FM radio. They gave us the frequency on the 802 CAC. The CAC is a key aggregate crypto system which is used to encode and decode messages. Since I was still trying to locate the area, I gave the CAC to Pete. He then unscrambled the frequency and we went up on the new frequency. On this frequency there were 3 helicopters, 2 helicopter gunships called embalmers, and 1 helicopter flare ship. Also on the frequency, the artillery support from Funan was also up on this push. We requested that the helicopter gunship drop some flares so we could find the area easier. They dropped 32 flares, and only 2 of these were functional. With these flares, we were able to get into the general area. The helicopter flare ship departed to get new flares. The ground commander then relayed to us that as soon as we could locate the friendly unit, we were cleared to expend ordnance 360 degrees around their location for a click and a half. That's 1,500 meters. We asked the Arty unit to put out some illumination rounds to help locate the friendly unit. These were out and we still did not have a definite fix on the friendly position. We asked if the ground unit had any pen gun flares. The answer was no. Did they have any other way to let us find their position? They were going to start a campfire. At this time, the Shadow AC-119 gunship checked in, and we gave him instructions on where we were located. Since he checked in on VHF, I had Pete cack up the FM push for them. They said they would be in the area at approximately 04:35 hours. It was presently 04:28 hours. I explained to them I was flying about 6,500 MSL. That's approximately 3,000 feet above the ground. The choppers were 500 to 1,000 feet above us, and the best altitude for him to enter would be above that. I was then circling the location and decided to try and drop one of our 4 flares. The helicopter gunships were getting low on fuel and needed to expend their ordnance. The first flare was a dud. I decided to make another pass and swung around for the flare drop. On this pass we began to receive moderate to heavy ground air fire from small arms and also a 50 cal AA machine gun. I asked the choppers if they were picking up the ground fire and they said they were, but did not have a definite tally on the area. My second flare went off on the ground at impact and did absolutely no good. At this time the Shadow reported that he was approaching the area. I checked back with the ground commander and they said they now had the fire going and we should be able to locate their position. Another pass over the area revealed now there were 2 campfires about 200 meters apart. I informed the ground commander to tell them, the ground unit, that I was going to fly over what I thought was their position, and if I flew over them to let me know. In this manner I could direct the Shadow gunship to expend its flares directly over the friendly position and then expend the helicopter ordnance so they could return to base for fuel and rearm. By this time I thought I had a pretty good idea where the friendly unit was, but I wanted to be absolutely sure. We could pick up the flashes of the mortars as they would impact the ground, but did not know if they were incoming or outgoing mortars. The ground commander came back on the air and told me they were standing by for my pass. The time was 0440. I rolled the aircraft in for the pass from about 6,300 MSL, about 2,300 feet above the ground. Power was pulled all the way back and we began our descent to the suspected friendly position. Immediately after starting downward, we began to receive ground fire from the 50 cal. As we continued to descend, the red tracers kept getting closer to the aircraft. With the 50 cal machine gun, there are 10 bullets and then 1 red tracer. I picked up a second 50 cal position which was also firing at us. We later found out from the second fact in the area that there were 3 to 4 50 cal guns set up around an area in the formation of a triangle for area concentration. I continued to use evasive maneuvers as we continued down toward our objective at about approximately 4,000 MSL, which is 750 to 1,000 feet above the ground. We had red 50 cal tracers flashing by on both the top and bottom of the nose. These were of such intensity that they caused Pete to exclaim, "Oh my God, did you see that?" He had seen red tracers crisscrossing on the nose of the aircraft. We were caught in a crossfire. I informed the Shadow gunship and the Embalmer gunships that I had selected the wrong campfire. The enemy campfire was a campfire on the east, while the friendly campfire was a campfire on the west. I informed them they were cleared to expend ordnance within a click and a half of the friendly campfire on the west. As I started to pull the nose of the aircraft up and brake to the right, I remarked to Pete, "We're getting the hell out of here." As I applied the power to the engines, it quickly became evident that we were in trouble as we had no power response. Pete asked me what was wrong, and I replied I didn't know. I was quickly going through the emergency procedures, trying to diagnose the reason for the engine problems. The rear engine had seized. There was not much could be done for it. The front engine was still spinning, and I concentrated my efforts on the front engine to get it started. I tried to punch off the stores but was unsuccessful as I couldn't find the jettison button due to the lights being out. The lights for the instrument panel had been completely blacked out and would not turn up. We must have taken a round through the instrument panel, which cut some wires, thus eliminating electricity to certain systems. Many things could have happened to the rear engine. Most likely it either took a hit in the cylinder wall and exploded, seizing, or more likely the oil pan had been hit and the engine froze up. I was checking all the switches in their proper position, mainly with the mags and fuel. With these, the engines will still run. All were okay. The fuel selectors were tried in every position and the boost pumps turned on. Still no engine response. At this time, Pete yelled to me, "We're losing altitude, get rid of the stores." I once again tried to find the jettison button, still no luck. I began to set the armament switches for drop, but realized I'd never have time to complete it. I finally forgot about the stores and continued to work on the engines. Still no luck. Pete suggested I use a starter. We tried the starter button and still no luck. I got on the radio and made a call to the ground commander, to the chopper and the shadow. I told them we were hit and we were going down north of the target area. At this time, the front engine sputtered to life. With the boost pumps running and the selectors in the right tank, it ran, giving us only partial power. Pete told me that we were still going down and we were below the trees. He also told me the stall warning horn was on. The stall warning horn said that we were in slow flight. I made no reply. I turned the landing light on and made a small turn to the right to avoid a tree. At this time, the front engine quit again. No attempt was made to restart it. All levers retarded, and this time the right wing struck a tree, and we were spun to the right, 270 degrees. Pete was thrown forward into the windshield. His seat had broken loose. Then he was tossed into the back with the radios. I was slammed forward and hit the gun sight with my helmet and the dash panel with my elbows and knees. Then all was quiet. I can remember thinking to myself, well, what do you know? I'm still alive. I then thought of Pete, who was no longer sitting next to me. I looked over at him and asked him how he was. He also replied that he was okay. I then tried to figure out where all the light was coming from. Finally figured out that it was a landing light and quickly turned this off. I never thought of the rotating beacon or the position light. The next thing I did was to get on the radio and once again got on FM to talk to the helicopters in the ground unit and also Shadow. I informed them that we had gone down approximately 700 meters north of the target area, that we were okay and we were going to travel further north to please get us some help. At this time, the ground commander could not picture what had happened to us, so I transmitted the same message a second time. Once again, the ground commander was unable to comprehend that we were now on the ground. But the helicopter gunship came up on frequency and said he had a copy of the situation. I told him we were heading to the north, and as soon as we were hit, I would give him a call on the UHF. During the time I was doing this, Pete had picked himself up from the floor. He made a call on guard stating, "This is Earth Force 7. We were shot down north of the target. Need help. Mayday, mayday, mayday." Then he turned off the rotating beacon and he got out of the aircraft, took his parachute and helmet off, and he headed to the north. After concluding my radio transmissions, I began to check for all classified material. I zeroized the KY-28, picked up my checklist, and started looking for the CAC. I was unable to find the CAC. It was probably thrown out of the aircraft during impact when the door was torn loose. I then got out of the aircraft, took off my chute and helmet, and stacked them on the door ledge. At this time, Pete had come running back to the aircraft. "Let's go, Dick. We have to get out of here." I once again checked the aircraft for any material that would help the VC, and then felt for my .38. It wasn't in its holster. I then went back to the aircraft and found it back by the radios. It had come loose during the impact and torn the snap off of the holster. I then checked it for 6 shells and slightly cussed to myself for not bringing my Car 15. We now headed to the north, about 100 meters away from the aircraft. we found a large bunch of trees. We decided to stay there and make a radio transmission. As we were reaching the trees, we had bullets whistling by overhead. We both crouched lower. You know a bullet's close when you can hear it whiz. It just sounds zzz. The area we were walking through was knee-high brambles and great tangled masses, and the only way to get through them was to break our way through, which we did, and it was very noisy. When we arrived at the trees, we both got out our survival radios. I transmitted on guard, and Balmer 2-7, this is Herb 4-7, how do you read? He came back that I was loud and clear and go ahead. At this time, Pete tried his radio, but all he could transmit was static. I told Pete his radio was bad and to get off of it. I then went back to the radio. 2-7, this is Herb 4-7. We're north of our aircraft. At this time, a flare went off just to our south. We're 500 meters northeast of the flare that just went off. No reply. So I asked him if he could still read us, and at this time he came back that I was loud and clear. So I repeated my transmission. I then remember saying to him, "Say, can you drop down here and pick us up? We'd like to get the hell out of here." He replied, Herb 4-7, this is 2-7. Our other gunship had to go home and refuel, but we have a slick on the way to get you out. I then asked him if he'd like to make a low pass, and that Pete and I would just grab onto his runners and ride back to Pleiku hanging on. But he replied the ground fire was too bad and he would wait for more help before attempting a pickup. I replied, okay, we'll be here. Then I asked him when the other ship would be in the area. He replied 10 to 15 minutes, and we both set out. During the prior discussion with Embalmer 2-7, I was crouching low by the trees. When I looked over to where Pete was, he was digging himself a hole and covering himself up. He then stopped and asked me as he got out his other radio, "Say, do you think I ought to go up on beeper and let him know where you are?" He then turned his radio on and broadcast his beeper. I had mine on 2-7. We had a beeper broadcasting throughout the jungle. I told him, "Pete, turn the damn thing off. They know where we are. Get off the radio." We then discussed the feasibility of going further north away from the aircraft, but after a few steps and a lot of noise, we decided it would be best to wait until it was dawn to travel. Another factor was that we would be walking away from a perfect LZ, a landing zone. Then Pete went back to his cover and began to cover himself up. I said the Lord's Prayer. Then I got back on the radio and asked 2-7 how things were going and explained to him we're getting pretty anxious. He came back and replied the pickup chopper was 10 to 15 minutes out. I thanked him and told him we'd be monitoring the radio. During the stay on the ground, we could hear the firefight raging to our south. We were close enough to the enemy so when he would drop a mortar into the barrel, we could hear the metallic clink as it dropped down the barrel. We could also hear them firing shots around our location, with an occasional bullet whizzing by overhead. When the enemy realized we were down, they deployed 2 small units to find and kill us. We could now hear these units along our east and west sides. They were firing random shots into the trees and bushes. Each time we talked to 2-7, he would tell us they were on their way, and each time we got off the radio, we could hear the patrols and their random single shots getting closer and closer. After being on the ground approximately 30 minutes, these patrols were on an east-west line with us, and we were stuck in the middle. I considered now that this was the time to move, but once again convinced myself that to move through this vegetation would only give our position away. We stayed. At this time, I heard a second copter come into the area. I quickly got on the radio. Embalmer 2-7. 2-7, this is Herb 4-7 here. Has that slick finally arrived? Herb 4-7, this is 2-7. We have a slick on station, but it's our flare ship. It's too heavy to get down and pick you up. The rescue slick should be here in 5 to 10 minutes. Being overeager to get out, I replied, 2-7, this is 4-7. Can't we throw the damn flares overboard and get us out? He replied that he would need the extra cover when it was time for the pickup. He told me he was doing the best he could to get us out. I replied, 2-7, we know you're doing your best. Thanks a lot. Another eternity goes by. The firefight to our south continues to rage. The 2 patrols are now a little to our northeast and northwest. More flares go off, and Pete tells the chopper that we're about 400 meters north of the flares. We have a helicopter overhead at this time. More time passes. The isolated shots from the patrols continue popping off a little to our north now. I get back on the radio. 2-7, this is 4-7. How are things look? Herb 4-7, this is 2-7. It should be 2 or 3 minutes. The pickup ship will be a Dustoff 2-8. 2-7, this is Herb 4-7. Thanks a lot. We'll be monitoring. After what seemed like another eternity, we hear another chopper coming into the area. Dustoff 2-8 then calls Embalmer 2-7 to let him know they're in the area. By this time, I'm standing up by a tree to try to pick up the Dustoff lights. I get a tally on what I think is Dustoff and attempt to make contact with him. Dustoff 2-8, Herb 4-7, how do you read? Herb 4-7, you're coming through broken. Say again. Once again, Dustoff 2-8, this is Herb 4-7, how do you read? Herb, this is Dustoff, we have you loud and clear. Go ahead. Roger that, 2-8. I think I have a tally on you at this time. You are at our 10 o'clock. We are hidden in some trees. First 4-7, 2-8, have you got an LZ or will we need a hoist? 2-8, this is Herb 4-7. We will not need a hoist. We have a small field to our south that we can be picked up in. There is 3 to 4 foot high brush in the area, and we are now at your 9 o'clock. 2 more flares go off. We are about 300 meters north of the flares. Hey Pete, get out of your cover and get over here. I'll direct him in, and when he gets you, you go first to the chopper. Good luck. Dustoff 2-8, this is Herb 4-7. I just lost sight of you. I was at your 7 o'clock, come 180 degrees left. Herb 4-7, this is 2-8. Say again, you were broken up. I repeated my instructions. They rogered my transmission. Dustoff 2-8, this is Herb 4-7. I now have a tally on 3 choppers. Which one are you? 4-7, 2-8, we are blacked at now. Now spotlight on. Tally ho. I am at your 11 o'clock, about 1 click. Keep coming. Come left further, 12 o'clock. Now about 700 meters. You are receiving very heavy ground fire. Let's move a little, Pete. Get ready. Come left. I tell him 300 meters. Keep coming. Your light is on us now, 200 meters. Do you have us? Pete and I are waving our arms, standing up in the floodlight. Bullets are whizzing by our heads. 2-8, this is 4-7. Don't stop, we're at your 12 o'clock, 100 meters. Keep coming. Your light is on us once again. You're coming right toward us. The chopper swoops to 20 meters of us and is hovering. We're off. Automatic weapons are firing all around us. Bullets whiz by overhead. Pete is about 15 meters from the chopper running through the brambles. He falls. He is scrambling to get up again. I give him a little help and he's off again. As I helped him to his feet, I toss my radio away. In my left hand and I have my .38. Run, Pete, run! He trips again in the brambles that are grabbing our clothes. Another assist, and he is off. Run, run! More bullets whiz by overhead. Pete falls again. Another helping hand and he's off. Don't stop, Pete, run! The chopper wash is throwing dust all over the place. It gets into our eyes. We can barely see. Pete finally reaches the chopper and scrambles in with verbal encouragement from me. I jump in. As I jump in, I can see people firing at us. So I start shooting with my .38. Let's go! The helicopter climbs out of the area amidst heavy ground fire. I grab Pete. We made it! We made it! I grab the crew member that is on my side of the chopper. Thank you! Thank you! God bless you. After getting a helmet from the chopper crew, I get back on the radio and thank all of the aircraft that participated in the rescue and inform them that Pete and I are buying the bar tonight. God bless you. Looking back, Pete and I escaped with only abrasions, contusions from the crash. The aircraft was destroyed that afternoon amidst more .50 cal fire. The aircraft has received 4 probable hits. The rear engine, the front dash causing the lights to go out, the rear cabin area, and a suspected hit in the left fuel tank, left wing fuel tank or front engine fuel line. During the impact, the right wing was offset to the rear, the right strut was torn off, there was oil or gas fumes on the ground. Both pods were gone, indicating that I had been able to punch them off. An embalmer is a Huey Cobra helicopter gunship. A slick is a regular helicopter without armament except the door gun. And the dust-off is a slick helicopter used for medical evacuations of wounded troops, called a medical copter. After arrival at Pleiku, Pete and I both kissed the ground, and then we were rushed off to the hospital. We were released from the hospital after a couple days. My next flight was 5 days after that. Believe me when I tell you that that flight I was nowhere near the ground. Lessons learned, I can tell you there is a God. I can also tell you that Pete and I are two of the luckiest persons alive. The one thing I continue to take with me from this incident was life is precious. You have to live each moment to the fullest and enjoy everyone. Make sure the people that you love know they're loved. Unfortunately, when Pete was transferred to Germany flying OV-10s, he had an aircraft accident resulting in his death. I went on to fly T-37s, T-38s, T-33s, and the U-2, both the R model and C model. Had a great career. My time in Vietnam was a very interesting and wonderful experience. By the time I left, I had over 302 combat missions, 710.4 combat hours. I had received 10 air medals, 3 Distinguished Flying Crosses, 1 Silver Star, and 1 Purple Heart, along with the Vietnamese Cross of Gallantry with Palm. Years later, I found out there's one book that you don't ever want to be in, and that's the book Vietnam Air Losses. That's the fixed-wing air losses in Southeast Asia, 1961 to 1973. That concludes the story of February 1st, 1971. Thank you for listening, and the bar's open.